Would you like to start reconstructing virtual models yourself using photos or videos? Or do you need a few practical tips and tricks? Then you've come to the right place. Today I will give you an argument and a recording strategy so that you can do without camera calibration for 3D reconstructions in the future. But what does this camera calibration actually mean, or more precisely, why do I have to deal with the distortion correction of camera lenses when I do photogrammetry or videogrammetry? With some cameras, the distortion of the lens is more noticeable than with others. The GoPro Hero with the fish-eye lens is such an example, where you can often see such a typical distortion of the image when taking pictures. We therefore note that the visible distortion in the image is due to the curvature of the lens. The question now is whether or not we should rectify our photographs before the 3D reconstruction process. Are there programs with which the images can be corrected automatically? There are many programs available for camera calibration that you can use. We have developed one called J-Undistortion in the Archaeocopter project. You can download it from the book website and try it out right away. Here we see briefly what the program does step by step. First, we have a collection of recordings that we want to correct. In order to better interpret the deformation of the lens and the recording system, we create a second set of images with a pattern known to the system. Here we pay attention to the instructions and look at the pattern from different perspectives and distances. This second image set is automatically analyzed and the intersection points of the fields are identified. Now we calculate the parameters that are necessary to bring these intersection points into a plane and thus obtain the so-called intrinsic camera parameters. We can then use these to correct the first image set. This raises the question, do we always have to correct the images beforehand? There can be situations, especially with strong wide-angle recordings. Here we see an example from a documentation campaign in Iceland from 2015, where a GoPro Hero was used. On the left, you can see the result with the original recordings. Due to the presence of the fisheye lens, a curvature of the overall model can be seen. However, when viewed from above, this curvature is barely noticeable. The example in the middle shows the result with distortion correction of the images. Already in the upper image, the plane of flight is very clearly visible. However, the distortion correction of the camera images is a very sensitive step where great care is required. Wrong parameters can very easily lead to completely incorrect results, as the example on the right clearly shows. But be careful. The intrinsic camera parameters can change slightly with every recording. They are dependent on temperature and altitude. The so-called fundamental matrix is an important tool for pose estimation. In other words, the estimation of the photo recordings relative to a captured scene. Don't worry, I won't explain it today, but you should know one important point. The fundamental matrix already contains the intrinsic camera parameters K, which are estimated parallel to the position and orientation of the images. Anyway, but what does that mean now? Let's take a quick look at one of the best-known tools for image-based 3D reconstructions. In reality capture, we have various distortion models for cameras to choose from in the alignment step, or the so-called pose estimation. Brown's model is certainly the most commonly used. This means that the camera parameters K can be extended by a lens estimation. But beware, you can help the reconstruction software to find very specific parameters. A particularly effective recording strategy for determining the camera parameters was investigated and presented by James and Robson in 2014. First, an orthogonal grid flight is recorded at a constant flight altitude. Then an opposite flight is performed on the same trajectories rotated by 20 degrees and about 5% higher. For us, in close-range photogrammetry, this also means adjusting the distances in the recording strategy and even rotating the camera slightly for redundant image areas. Let's summarize briefly. During camera calibration, we estimate the intrinsic camera parameters in order to be able to correct the images. We do not necessarily need this step for the 3D reconstruction process, as the camera parameters are estimated there. A fixed focal length significantly improves the parameter estimation. A favorable recording strategy also improves the parameter estimation.